Marcus Chen wiped the sweat from his forehead as he finished feeding the chickens behind his small wooden house in the Montana wilderness. The last rays of sunlight painting the endless grassland in shades of gold and amber, while his faithful horse Thunder grazed peacefully near the old oak tree that had stood there longer than anyone could remember. The silence of the evening was broken only by the gentle whisper of wind through the grass and the distant call of a hawk circling overhead, creating the kind of peace that Marcus had chosen over the busy colonies where most humans now lived. Among the stars with their alien neighbors in the Galactic Federation. He had been a combat medic once, saving lives on distant worlds, but after seeing too much death and destruction, he decided to return to Earth where he could tend his animals and live simply, far from the politics and technology that seemed to consume everyone else. Thunder nickered softly and trotted over to the fence, his dark eyes reflecting the dying light as Marcus scratched behind his ears, remembering how he had found the wild Mustang injured and alone 15 years ago, nursing him back to health until they became inseparable companions. The peaceful moment shattered like glass when a brilliant streak of fire tore across the sky, followed by a thunderous crash that shook the ground and sent Thunder rearing in terror, his hooves striking the air as something large and metallic smashed into the north pasture with enough force to create a crater visible even from the house. Marcus grabbed his medical kit and flashlight from the porch, his old training taking over as he ran toward the crash site, his boots slipping on the dewy grass while his heart pounded with a mixture of fear and curiosity about what had fallen from the stars. The wreckage was unlike anything he had ever seen, made of a material that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal in the beam of his flashlight. And as he climbed carefully through the twisted debris, he heard something that pukes blah. He heard something that pukes blah, most pukes blah, and leaves a rich, long-lasting color, made of a mix, made of a material that seemed to made some cellites. And as may seem so careful, made so some less blee news. May seem samide, may sublime, we see my nade. We seem so less of eyes, we see with weed, we I wis, but I'm so I words I command, I'm all set, I so sa gabri bequeast, kiet sit secret to side isolatita, I pix blad I bisic sit wet the sit, it's it to the glass it's lit to be it to put we sist get to the quick made him freeze in place. A soft musical sound that could only be described as weeping. Following the sound deeper into the wreckage, Marcus discovered a being that took his breath away. A tall figure with pale skin that seemed to glow with its own inner light, lying crumpled and bleeding among the broken pieces of her spacecraft. She was clearly not human, with features that were both alien and beautiful. Her long silver hair spread around her like spilled moonlight and strange symbols glowing faintly beneath her translucent skin. But the pain in her large, dark eyes was something Marcus recognized from 1,000 battlefields. Her wounds were severe, deep gashes that leaked a luminescent fluid instead of blood, and her breathing was labored as she struggled to stay conscious, her lips moving in what sounded like a prayer in a language that reminded Marcus of wind chimes and flowing water. Without hesitation, he knelt beside her and began applying pressure to the worst wounds, using gauze and bandages from his kit while speaking in gentle, soothing tones even though he knew she probably could not understand his words. She looked up at him with eyes like liquid starlight, and for a moment, Marcus felt a strange warmth spread through his chest, as if she was somehow communicating gratitude without speaking, her alien features softening as she realized he meant no harm. He managed to stabilize her enough to carefully carry her back to his house, laying her on his bed while he worked through the night to clean and bandage her wounds, using every skill he had learned as a medic to keep her alive. For 3 days, she drifted between consciousness and fever dreams, sometimes speaking in her musical language while Marcus sat beside her, offering water and what comfort he could provide, watching helplessly as her condition slowly worsened. Despite his best efforts, on the 4th morning, he woke to find her burning with fever, her skin so hot it seemed to glow brighter. And he knew with the terrible certainty of experience that she was dying from some kind of infection his human medicines could not touch. Standing in his kitchen, staring at the antibiotics that were useless against alien biology, Marcus made a decision that would have seemed impossible to anyone who knew how much Thunder meant to him. But as he looked at the dying woman who had somehow become his responsibility, he realized there might be one chance to save her. Thunder carried a rare genetic marker that Marcus had discovered years ago when the horse survived a plague that killed other animals, producing antibodies that seemed to work against multiple types of pathogens, including some alien ones he had encountered during his military service. With hands that shook only slightly, Marcus prepared the syringe that would end his oldest friend's life, leading Thunder to the barn, where the horse nuzzled his shoulder trustingly, never suspecting what was about to happen. The injection was quick and painless, and as Thunder's eyes grew dim and his great heart stopped beating, Marcus whispered an apology and a promise that his sacrifice would not be forgotten, even as tears streamed down his weathered face. Working with desperate efficiency, Marcus processed Thunder's blood to create a crude but potentially effective serum, his veterinary knowledge guiding him as he prepared the injection that represented his last hope for the alien woman who had crashed into his quiet life. He found her barely breathing, her skin now so hot it was painful to touch, and as he carefully injected the serum into her arm, he watched and waited, praying to whatever gods might listen that his friend's death would not be in vain. For hours, nothing changed, and Marcus began to think he had sacrificed Thunder for nothing. But then, just as the first rays of dawn began to filter through the bedroom window, the alien woman's fever broke and her eyes opened, clear and alert for the first time since the crash. She looked at Marcus with an expression of wonder and gratitude, slowly raising one pale hand to touch his face while tears that sparkled like diamonds rolled down her cheeks. And when their skin made contact, Marcus felt something extraordinary. A flood of warmth and understanding that transcended language, as if she was sharing her very soul with him in that moment. She whispered something in her musical language, a single word that somehow conveyed more meaning than 1,000 speeches. And Marcus felt his heart fill with a strange peace, knowing that Thunder's sacrifice had saved not just a life, but something infinitely precious and rare in the cold vastness of space. As the sun climbed higher, painting the room in golden light, the alien woman smiled at Marcus one last time before her form began to shimmer and fade, disappearing like morning mist until only a small, pearl-like scale remained on the pillow, where her head had rested, along with the memory of her touch and the certainty that this was not the end of their story, but only the beginning. Marcus woke with a start as the morning light streamed through his bedroom window, immediately reaching for the pearl-like scale on his nightstand to confirm the previous night's events had been real. But when he stepped outside to bury Thunder's body, he froze in absolute terror at the sight that greeted him across his peaceful Montana ranch. Dozens of tall figures stood motionless in the early morning mist, scattered across his property like silent statues, each one identical to the alien woman he had saved. Their flowing garments that seemed woven from actual starlight rippling gently in the breeze, despite their complete stillness. His heart hammered against his ribs as he counted them. 30, 40, maybe 50 beings standing perfectly still, facing his house but maintaining an exact distance that formed an eerie circle around his property. And the most unsettling part was that none of them had moved a single inch since he first spotted them, as if they had simply materialized with the dawn. Marcus grabbed his rifle from inside the house, his hands shaking as he approached the nearest figure, a being so beautiful and otherworldly that she seemed carved from moonlight itself. But as he drew closer, she stepped backward with fluid grace, maintaining the same precise distance while the others shifted like a living pattern to accommodate her movement. The silence was deafening, broken only by the whisper of grass beneath their feet and Marcus's own ragged breathing as he realized these creatures were coordinating without speaking, moving as one entity despite being separate individuals, and the intelligence behind their perfect synchronization sent chills down his spine. Suddenly, one figure stepped forward from the group, and Marcus's breath caught in his throat as he recognized the alien woman he had saved. Now radiant and healthy, her wounds completely healed and her skin glowing with renewed vitality that made her seem like a goddess descended from the stars. When she spoke, her voice was like music flowing directly into his mind. And somehow, impossibly, Marcus understood every word as if she were speaking his native language, though her lips moved to sounds no human throat could produce. She introduced herself as Lyralei of the Nyxandra, explaining that her people were ancient empaths who could feel the emotional resonance of all living beings across vast distances. And her crash had not been an accident, but an escape from her own kind who had grown cold and distant over countless centuries. The sacrifice Marcus had made for a complete stranger, she continued, had created such a powerful wave of pure love and selflessness that it rippled through space itself, awakening emotions in her sisters that they thought had died millennia ago, calling them from across the galaxy to witness this impossible human who loved without expecting anything in return. As Lyralei spoke, Marcus felt the weight of dozens of alien gazes studying him, not with hostility, but with something far more unsettling, a desperate hunger for understanding. As if they were trying to solve a puzzle that could change everything they believed about the universe. But their peaceful vigil was about to be shattered because far overhead, it's barely visible against the morning sky, the sleek shapes of Galactic Federation warships were already descending toward Earth, their sensors having detected the massive alien presence and their commanders preparing for what could be either humanity's greatest diplomatic triumph or its most dangerous first contact scenario. Marcus looked up at the approaching ships, then back at the circle of silent watchers, and realized that his simple act of kindness had somehow placed him at the center of events that could reshape the entire galaxy. With consequences he was only beginning to understand. The Federation warships descended like metallic vultures against the Montana sky, their engines humming with barely contained power as they established a defensive perimeter around Marcus's ranch, and from the largest vessel emerged Admiral Sarah Voss, her military uniform crisp and her expression grim as she approached the farmhouse where Marcus stood, surrounded by silent alien watchers who seemed completely unconcerned by the show of human force. Marcus felt his stomach drop when he recognized Sarah, his former commanding officer from his combat medic days, knowing that her presence meant the Federation viewed this situation as either a golden opportunity or a deadly threat, and probably both at the same time. Lyralei stepped closer to Marcus, her luminous eyes never leaving the approaching soldiers. And as she placed her hand on his arm, something extraordinary happened. Marcus suddenly felt overwhelmed by a flood of memories and emotions that weren't his own. Visions of countless worlds and civilizations that the Nyxandra had observed over millions of years. Through Lyralei's touch, he experienced the terrible weight of knowledge that her people carried. Having witnessed every form of cruelty, greed, and violence that intelligent species could inflict upon each other, watching empires rise and fall, while hearts grew cold and compassion withered like flowers in winter. The Nyxandra had become living libraries of emotional pain, cataloging the feelings of billions of beings across the galaxy, and over time, they had closed their own hearts to survive the crushing weight of so much suffering, becoming detached Observers who felt nothing rather than risk being destroyed by the endless cycle of tragedy they witnessed. But Marcus's sacrifice of thunder had been different from anything in their vast database of recorded emotions. Pure love given freely. To a stranger, with no hope of reward, no expectation of gratitude. Just the simple human belief that every life had value, regardless of species or origin. As Sarah approached with her security team, weapons ready but not raised, Marcus felt Lyralei sharing more of his own memories through their connection, showing him scenes from his childhood that he had almost forgotten the way he used to rescue injured birds and nurse them back to health in makeshift hospitals made from cardboard boxes. His decision to become a medic so he could save lives instead of taking them. His choice to remain on Earth when others fled to the stars because someone needed to care for the forgotten places and forgotten creatures. Through Lyralei's empathic abilities, Marcus realized that these moments of compassion weren't random acts, but part of something deeper in his character. A fundamental inability to see suffering without trying to help, even when helping cost him everything he held dear. Sarah stopped 10 feet away, her hand resting on her sidearm as she studied the alien beings who watched her with unsettling intensity. And when she spoke, her voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question, demanding to know what these creatures wanted and whether they posed a threat to human security. Lyralei responded by sharing her people's history directly with Sarah's mind, causing the Admiral to stagger backward as she experienced centuries of Nyxandra observations of human behavior. Wars, conquests, betrayals, and cruelties that painted humanity as just another violent species destined for self-destruction. But then came Marcus's act of sacrifice, shining like a beacon of hope in the darkness of recorded history, proving that humans were capable of something the Nyxandra thought impossible: love that transcended self-interest. The emotional revelation had created a crisis within Nyxandra society, splitting them between those who wanted to maintain their cold detachment and those who yearned to feel again, to experience the warmth and connection they had abandoned eons ago. As Sarah struggled to process what she had experienced, her radio crackled with urgent reports from Federation sensors detecting massive energy signatures approaching Earth. And Marcus looked up to see new shapes blotting out the sun crystalline. Vessels 10 times larger than the Federation ships, their surfaces reflecting light like captured stars as they took positions around the planet. Lyralei's grip on Marcus's arm tightened, and through their connection, he felt her terror and despair as she whispered that the conservative faction had arrived, led by her own mother, and they would do anything to prevent the emotional contamination from spreading further through their species, even if it meant destroying the humans who had caused this awakening. The crystalline ships hung in Earth's sky like frozen lightning, their surfaces pulsing with energy that made the air itself vibrate with barely contained power. And from the largest vessel descended a figure so imposing that even the other Nyxandra stepped back in fearful reverence: Matriarch Zenzandra, Lyralei's mother, whose presence seemed to drain warmth from the very atmosphere as she materialized in Marcus's humble barnyard. Her skin was pale as winter ice, her eyes cold as the void between stars. And when she spoke, her voice carried the authority of someone who had ruled for millennia without ever being questioned, demanding that her contaminated daughters cease this foolishness immediately and return to their ships, before the emotional infection spread any further through their species. Admiral Voss positioned her troops in defensive formations around the barn, their weapons trained on beings who could probably destroy them with a thought, while Federation reinforcements continued arriving from orbit, turning the quiet Montana ranch into the most heavily militarized piece of farmland in human history. Marcus found himself standing between 3 different factions, each with their own agenda: the Federation wanting to secure Nyxandra technology and knowledge, the conservative Nyxandra viewing humanity as a dangerous plague that needed to be eliminated. and Lyralei's awakened sisters, caught between loyalty to their people and their newfound desire to experience the emotions they had suppressed for so long. The tension in the air was so thick it felt suffocating as matriarch Zenzandra began what could only be described as the strangest diplomatic meeting in galactic history. Conducted in Marcus's weathered old barn while chickens pecked at the ground nearby, and the smell of hay mixed with the ozone scent of alien technology. Admiral Voss immediately began pushing for technological exchanges and formal treaties, her military mind calculating the strategic advantages that Nixandra science could provide to human colonies, while Matriarch Zenzandra dismissed such concerns with icy disdain, explaining that her people had no interest in the primitive ambitions of younger species. Lyralei tried desperately to mediate between her mother's cold logic and Sarah's aggressive diplomacy, her voice shaking as she pleaded for understanding. But both sides seemed determined to view this encounter through the lens of conquest, or control, rather than genuine communication. As the arguments grew more heated and weapons began to charge with ominous humming sounds, Marcus realized that everyone was missing the fundamental point of what had brought them all together, and he stepped forward into the center of the barn, his simple ranch clothes and weathered face a stark contrast to the advanced beings surrounding him. His voice was quiet but carried clearly in the sudden silence as he began to tell them about thunder. Not about the sacrifice itself, but about their relationship. How he had found a wild Mustang, broken and afraid. How trust had been built slowly, through patience and respect. They had become partners rather than master and servant, through mutual choice rather than force. He explained that the best relationships, whether between human and horse or between different species, weren't about what you could take or control, but about choosing to walk the same path together, supporting each other not because you had to, but because you wanted to. The simple honesty in his words created ripples of emotion that even the conservative Nixandra could feel. And as Marcus spoke about love that asked for nothing in return, about friendship that cost everything but gave back more than it took, about the courage required to remain gentle in a harsh universe, Matriarch Zenzandra began to tremble. Her carefully maintained emotional barriers, built over millennia of deliberate detachment, started to crack under the weight of feelings she had buried so deep she thought they were gone forever. And when the first tear rolled down her ancient face, it glowed like liquid starlight in the dim light of the barn. The sight of their eternal, unchanging matriarch weeping openly shattered something fundamental in the conservative Nixandra ranks. And as more of them began to experience emotions they had suppressed for eons, the artificial divide between the factions started to crumble, like a dam breaking under unstoppable pressure. The tears that fell from Matriarch Zenzandra's ancient eyes seemed to break more than just her emotional barriers. They shattered the rigid unity of the conservative Nixandra as dozens of her followers began experiencing their own emotional awakening, some collapsing to their knees as millennia of suppressed feelings crashed over them like tsunamis, while others reached out tentatively to touch their awakened sisters. Desperate to understand what they were feeling for the first time in eons, Admiral Voss watched in amazement as the most advanced civilization in known space underwent a fundamental transformation right there in Marcus's barn, her strategic mind already calculating the implications of what this could mean for galactic politics. But Marcus simply sat quietly on a hay bale, exhausted by the intensity of events that had spiraled far beyond anything he could have imagined. When he first found that crashed alien woman, in the days that followed, as news of the emotional awakening spread throughout Nixandra space, their civilization faced a choice that would determine their future. Some chose to return to their old ways of detached observation, boarding their crystalline ships and disappearing back into the cold depths of space. But many others decided to remain near Earth, establishing a small settlement in the valleys surrounding Marcus's ranch where they could learn to navigate their rediscovered capacity for feeling. The pearl-like scale that Lyralei had left behind revealed its true nature. When she explained that it was a bioneural interface, not a piece of alien technology to be studied and exploited, but a gift of trust that would allow limited emotional sharing between their species, helping humans and Nyxandra understand each other in ways that words alone could never achieve. The Galactic Federation, initially disappointed by the lack of technological windfall they had hoped to extract from first contact, soon discovered something far more valuable than weapons or faster-than-light engines. The emotionally awakened Nyxandra became extraordinary mediators and counselors, their empathic abilities allowing them to resolve conflicts that had raged for centuries across Federation space by helping different species understand each other's deeper motivations and fears. Marcus found his peaceful ranch transformed into something he never expected, an unofficial embassy where human children played. Alongside young Nyxandra, who were learning to laugh for the first time in their species' history, while their parents worked together to bridge the gap between two very different ways of understanding the universe. Lyralei became the first official Nyxandra ambassador to humanity, working closely with Marcus to help her people adapt to emotional experiences that ranged from simple joy at a sunset to complex grief for losses they had never properly mourned. And her presence brought a sense of wonder to the ranch that made even the most mundane tasks feel magical. The Federation established a permanent diplomatic station nearby, but it was nothing like the sterile government buildings found on other worlds. Instead, it resembled a comfortable farmhouse where species from across the galaxy could come to learn about conflict resolution through the simple but revolutionary concept of empathy. As months passed, Marcus often stood in the same pasture where Thunder had grazed, watching Lyralei teach groups of young Nyxandra how to care for Earth. Horses, their musical laughter echoing across the Montana. Hills like silver bells ringing in a new age of understanding between the stars. The wooden marker he had placed over Thunder's grave bore an inscription that had become a motto for the new era of cooperation. Sometimes the greatest gift is not what you gain, but what you're willing to give. Words that were now carved in monuments across a dozen worlds where the Nyxandra had helped heal old wounds through the power of shared feeling. On quiet evenings, Marcus and Lyralei would walk together toward his farmhouse. Two unlikely friends whose bond had changed the course of galactic civilization, proving that humanity's greatest strength wasn't found in advanced technology or military might, but in the simple, profound capacity to love selflessly, even for strangers who had fallen from alien stars into the endless grasslands of Montana, where miracles could still bloom in the most unexpected places.